Well, let's bring in the commissioner of hockey. Today is the 23rd anniversary of Gary Bettman taking over this position, the head man in hockey, and he's nice enough to join us on what I'm sure is a big, big day for him. So happy 23rd anniversary, Gary.
Well, thank you. I think you're trying to make me feel old.
Well, I'm old, so why not you join in?
Well, I don't know. Am I older than you are?
Let's see. I'll be 55 tomorrow. How old are you?
Oh, I got you by a bunch.
You know what? As long as we're both on this earth, we're doing it right.
That's it.
All right, so what's your take on the weekend? Are you happy with the way things turned out, Gary?
We had a spectacular weekend. The city of Nashville was an incredible host. That's a great place to have major events. The hospitality, the facilities, the engagement of the country music community and the artists was great. The game and the skills competition, the players were engaged. They were having fun. And we had an interesting and entertaining series of mini games yesterday. So by any measure, it was terrific.
Gary, what extent did the league go to convince John not to play in this game?
Well, what do you mean? We didn't convince him not to play. What we did was we had a candid conversation. Somebody had started a campaign which may have been aimed at us or the All-Star game or even John. And so there were a series of conversations by a lot of people, both at the league level and at his club level when he was with the Coyotes, about whether or not he wanted to play and what his view was. And if he wanted to play, great. And if he wanted to disengage, we would help him do that. But once he said, no, I want to play, that was the end of the discussion. It was his call as to whether or not he wanted to play.
All right, let me ask you some questions that are out there. Did the league engineer the trade to Montreal so that he would drop out because he got dropped into the minor leagues?
Absolutely not. He had already cleared waivers in Arizona. There's a lot of stuff going around about what did or didn't happen, most of which, if not all of which, isn't true. The fact is the league had nothing to do with the trade. We were surprised as anybody, and by the way, it didn't impact whether or not he played. We had already announced him as the captain. Mm-hmm. We had already made the decision that if this is what he wanted to do, we were good with it because the fans had spoken.
Was it right in your mind that he was voted?
Well, you know what? That's up to the fans. That was the process that was in place. People could have voted for whoever they wanted, and that's what they chose to do. Whether or not, but this goes back to the nature of the campaign and how it got started. But that was all irrelevant. We knew what the votes were. And we left it up to him as to whether or not ultimately he wanted to come. But that didn't mean that there were candid conversations about the pros and the cons. But again, we left it to him.
Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL, is our guest on the Michael Kay Show. He wrote in the Players Tribune that somebody from the NHL told him, is this something that your kids...
Guys, stop. We're beating a dead horse on this. He was there. We had a great weekend. He was welcomed with open arms. And the fact that there were a series of conversations on a decision that he had to make, let's not get carried away with this. It was a great story. The fact that he had fun there, he was embraced by the players and the fans, and he won the MVP, that's the headline. This other stuff is static.
But one last thing on that, though. Why would you have to have a conversation if you wanted to go if he was voted to go? Why would that be an issue?
Because he may not have wanted to go. He might, because again, it started with the notion was somebody started a campaign.
Right.
Maybe it was an attempt to embarrass the league. Maybe it was an attempt to embarrass the All-Star game. Maybe it was an attempt to embarrass him. And so with everything that was going on, the right thing to do was have a conversation with him.
Well, you're saying that
Guys,
this is all...
Please,
Gary,
this is
what everybody is talking about. I'm just saying, I feel bad.
What they're talking about is what a great weekend was and what a great story his involvement was and the way he was embraced by the fans and everybody else. When we both got to Nashville on Thursday night, he and I got together and I said, this is great. Have a great weekend. Anything you can do, that we can do to make the weekend more enjoyable, let us know. And we're glad you're here.
All right, so it turned out good for the league. But, Gary, is it something that, I don't think any league should allow fans to vote. If it was a game of excellence and not popularity, then John Scott should not have been playing. So I can't ask the other commissioners, are you going to change the fact that it's a fan vote?
I don't know. We focus on all our major events after they occur. We look at everything that we think went well. We look at things that we think we can do better. And this is something we'll have to focus on. But it's not a decision we've made. And frankly, there's no reason to make it now. We're still, coming down off of what was a great weekend.
I love the 3-on-3, the format with the divisions going up against each other. How'd you think it went, and do you believe that we'll see that in the future?
Well, the best thing about it was the players liked it, and obviously the fans did too. And so that's how you measure it. I mean, there was a lot of speculation and critiquing as to whether or not this was the right thing to do. But, you know, all-star games in all of the sports get criticized. You know, probably more so in football and in our sport because of the nature or of the physical nature of our games when they count, and the all-star games obviously a little different. But the 3-on-3, which has been doing so well during our regular season and really has been embraced, it is more suited to the style of play that you might get in an all-star game. And when you looked at the third game, the players were really into it, and it was great to see. It was fun. It was entertaining. And people were tuning into it and engaged in it in person.
I like what the league did as well. If you're not going to play in the All-Star game, then you're also going to be off the day after or the next game you play. I guess that couldn't happen in other sports, but I just want to commend you because guys should play in the All-Star game if it is for the fans.
Well, actually, it relates more to being injured. If you're injured, you know, you should be injured enough to miss a game.
Right.
However, if a guy is injured and he wants to come to All-Star and be there and be part of the weekend and other than play, then we don't apply the missing the game rule.
See, that's great. That's a good idea.
By the way, it's worked well. We have the support of the Players Association in that regard. And for us, it's worked very well. You know, you want players to have a good time with it, to be engaged with the fans, and be happy to be there. And I think, particularly with the skills on Saturday night, that's what we saw.
All-Star game in Los Angeles next year. It'll be the second time the Staples Center has hosted it, I think third time overall for Los Angeles. I don't believe there's been one in the metropolitan area, Gary, since the 94 game at Madison Square Garden. So when can fans here in the tri-state area maybe get a chance to see an All-Star game?
By the way, that's a great question. We have a list a mile long of teams that want to host our events. We recently had 2 outdoor games here. You know, it all goes into the mix. And, you know, if the Garden, the Rangers want to be hosting events, then they tell us, and we go through the process that we go with all teams.
How do you think Brooklyn's working out for the Islanders?
Well, I think Brooklyn's working out well. I think it's a work in progress. Obviously, the building wasn't designed for hockey, and I think they're doing a good job. People at Barclays are trying to make the adjustment. I think the fans, in terms of the building itself and the travel to get there, particularly for fans on Long Island, people are getting used to. But at the end of the day, you know, Nassau Coliseum was being used well past its due date, and it's great that the Islanders have a state-of-the-art arena that's certainly much more comfortable with the appropriate amenities that people want when they go to major events these days.
Gary, do me a favor. I know you're sick and tired of saying this, but I get so many tweets from people and calls. Oh, they're refurbishing the Coliseum. They're eventually going to go back there and play. There is no chance of that happening, right?
That's not something that I'm aware of. The fact of the matter is people should assume that Barclays Center is the home for the Islanders, and that's where they're playing. You know, it would have been nice had Nassau County been able to get its act together and have a new arena, I think, for not just for hockey, but for concerts and circuses and everything else. But it didn't work out. And the good news is the Islanders had a place to go because they couldn't have stayed in Nassau Coliseum any longer. And the fact that they had a place to go that was still in New York and on Long Island geographically was actually a real plus.
What's your take on the Weidman situation? I know he has the hearing tomorrow.
I have no take because I don't get involved with it at this stage. You know, it's obviously something that's got a lot of attention, and the reason I'm getting involved with it is whatever hockey operations Coley Campbell decides to do, if it gets appealed, it gets appealed to me, and I'll have to deal with it at that point, but I don't want to be in a position of having prejudged it.